In the heart of Seoul, where glass towers scrape the sky and ambition hums like electricity, she moved like a shadow. Amara Okui, mid-20s, her skin a deep, luminous brown that caught the fluorescent lights in a subtle glow, carried herself with a quiet dignity that went unnoticed. Low-cut, coily hair tucked neatly under a simple scarf, gray uniform pressed and apron tied, she maneuvered her mop with precision through the expansive hallways of Daehan Group headquarters. The executives passed her without a glance, heels clicking over polished floors, suits immaculate, voices sharp with authority. A spilled coffee, a careless trip over her cart, no apology came. A whispered joke about her accent, a chuckle at her expense ignored. And yet, Amara's eyes, observant and intelligent, captured it all. The arrogance, the whispered secrets, the mistakes no one would dare notice. She cleaned, she moved, she survived. But beneath the calm, a storm brewed, a mind calculating, remembering, always watching. It was past midnight, the corridors nearly deserted, when a door cracked open in the boardroom. Voices spilled out, urgent, almost frantic, discussing numbers, mergers, something about a missing contract no one outside the inner circle should hear. Amara froze, mop in hand, listening. Every detail registered. Figures whispered too low, deadlines ignored, a flaw that could unravel everything. No one knew she was there. No one would suspect the quiet maid would notice the discrepancy that could cost billions. And yet she did. Her heart did not race in fear, only in anticipation, the thrill of recognition. This was her world, unseen but not powerless. The corridors she polished hid secrets no one could guard. The night stretched on. She continued her duties, but a subtle unease lingered. Her hands wiped surfaces that carried traces of ambition, greed, and recklessness. Every pristine glass wall reflected faces she could never speak to, voices that could never hear her. She moved between opulence and invisibility, silently absorbing the pulse of a company that thought it ruled her world. And yet, not everyone ignored her. Across the hall, in his glass-walled office, Kong Jun-seo, the CEO, sat reviewing the same numbers, his sharp gaze briefly catching hers. For a moment, the cold mask of his expression faltered, and the world shifted imperceptibly. No one else noticed, the assistants, the board, the security cameras, but he did. Amara returned the gaze for a heartbeat, then looked away, pretending to mop the same floor she had cleaned 1,000 times. But something had changed. The air carried an unspoken promise. Tonight, nothing would remain as it seemed. A slip of paper fluttered from a drawer, and signed, revealing a single word, warning. She picked it up, eyes narrowing, understanding instantly. And in that moment, the building that had always ignored her seemed to pulse with danger, ambition, and opportunity, all aimed squarely at the maid no one had seen. The warning slip trembled in Amara's hand, sharp against her fingertips, yet she felt no fear, only focus. It was impossible to ignore. Every polished floor, every silent hallway suddenly seemed charged, as if the building itself had secrets waiting to pounce. She tucked the paper into her apron pocket, concealing it under the mundane fabric of her uniform, and resumed her duties with mechanical precision. Across the hall, a pair of dark eyes followed her movements. Kong Jun-seo, the man whose reputation for icy detachment was almost legendary, leaned back in his chair, studying the subtle shift in her posture. He had noticed before, slight corrections in documents, tiny hesitations that signaled intelligence. But tonight, there was a new weight to her steps. Something had stirred. For hours, she moved between offices, emptying trash bins, polishing glass panels, rearranging chairs, pretending the paper tucked against her skin was irrelevant. Yet every so often, her gaze flickered toward his office. He never spoke, never summoned her. Yet the intensity of his observation pressed on her, a presence she could neither ignore nor fully understand. The contrast was stark. By day, executives mocked her, spoke over her, and treated her as invisible. By night, the most powerful man in the building studied her with the same scrutiny reserved for board members and rivals. It was unnerving, almost intoxicating, a dangerous, unspoken tension that neither of them would name, but both recognized. At one point, Amara paused to rest her aching shoulders, only for Jun Seo to emerge from his office, silently placing a water bottle on the desk nearest to her. No words, no acknowledgement of her existence outside her work. But the gesture was deliberate, impossible to ignore. In that single, quiet act, she felt a recognition she had never known, mingled with confusion. Yet the rest of the building remained oblivious. Security guards whispered about her inefficiency, and the board's gossiping voices mocked her loyalty. The silent kindness of one man clashed violently against the disdain of an entire empire. That contrast settled over her like an electric current, uncomfortable, thrilling, and impossible to ignore. As midnight deepened, Amara returned to the supply room to restock cleaning supplies. The warning slip, now warm against her palm, reminded her she was no longer just invisible. Her observations had weight. Her silence had consequences. And Jun Seo, still in the shadows of his office, continued to watch, not with suspicion, but with calculation. The elevator chimed unexpectedly, and a shadow fell across the hallway, a figure she had not anticipated. Whoever it was carried an urgency that matched the paper in her pocket, and their eyes locked on hers with knowledge she could not yet grasp. The building that had ignored her for years suddenly became a trap she could not avoid. The figure in the hallway froze for a heartbeat, then moved closer. Amara's heart did not pound in fear, her mind sharpened. She had spent years being invisible, unnoticed, ignored. Yet here, in the silent pulse of the building at midnight, someone dared to step into her shadow. "Kong, Jun Seo," the figure murmured under his breath. But it wasn't him. It was Min Jae-ho, a mid-level executive known for his charm, wit, and ambition, and for seeing Amara as nothing more than a nuisance. His eyes flickered with suspicion as he stopped inches from her, scanning her apron and mop as if they could hide secrets. Amara's fingers brushed the warning slip tucked in her pocket, a lifeline and a trap all at once. She could run, as she had countless times before, melting into the shadows. But tonight was different. Tonight, she understood the building's heartbeat in a way no one else could. She stepped forward instead, quietly placing herself between Jae-ho and the door he had come to check. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice soft, but edged with a command that belied her years as an unseen maid. The power dynamic shifted, subtle but undeniable. For the first time, someone with authority felt a trace of her presence and hesitated. Jae-ho's lips twisted, a half-smile that masked irritation. "And what do you think you're protecting?" he asked. The words dripped with condescension, but Amara didn't flinch. In that moment, she wasn't just a maid. She was a keeper of knowledge they didn't suspect she possessed. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Amara's silence became a shield, her calm the weapon. Jae-ho shifted, irritated by the lack of reaction. Around them, the halls were empty, yet every shadow seemed to lean closer, listening. And then, without warning, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the far end. A deliberate, measured pace. Jun Seo's office light flickered, and Amara's pulse tingled with recognition. The silent observer was about to intervene. The contrast was stark. Jae-ho, confident and arrogant, believed he had control. Amara, underestimated, relied on instinct and observation. And Jun Seo, ever watchful, would soon tilt the balance entirely. Amara decided. She stepped aside, letting Jae-ho reach for the documents he had come to check. But as his hand touched the papers, Jun Seo emerged from the shadows, sharp and commanding. "Stop," he said, his voice low but ice-cold. The words carried weight beyond any title, and Jae-ho's smirk faltered. Amara's chest tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. In one glance, Jun Seo communicated what no one else could. She was seen. And then, before she could process the full consequences, Jaeho's hand knocked over the stack of papers, and the pile tumbled across the floor, revealing something he had been desperate to hide. Amara froze. Juneseo's eyes met hers, an unspoken warning in their depth. The building, silent for decades, now held its breath. The stack of papers lay scattered across the polished floor, each sheet a fragment of a plan nobody had wanted Amara, or anyone, to see. Numbers, names, and dates stared back at her like accusing eyes, revealing financial manipulations that could topple Daehan Group if left unchecked. Jaeho's face twisted in panic, a mask of arrogance slipping for the first time. His hand hovered over the documents, as though he could snatch them back and erase the truth. But the damage had been done. And all the while Amara stood silently, mop in hand, her posture deceptively casual, her mind calculating every possible move. Across the hall, Juneseo's shadow fell over the scattered papers. He didn't speak. His presence alone was enough to stop Jaeho in his tracks. Every inch of authority radiated from him, cold, precise, and undeniable. And in that moment, the maid no one noticed became the center of a silent storm that could consume anyone in its path. Word traveled faster than any elevator. By morning, whispers of the night's events circulated through the corridors. Executives and assistants alike speculated. Had the maid really interfered with Juneseo's operations? Could she have seen something she shouldn't? Some laughed, dismissing her as nothing more than a meddling cleaner. Others, however, began to glance at her differently, unease flickering in their eyes. The scandal that had been quietly brewing now had a new axis. The woman they had ignored, the one who cleaned their mistakes without a second thought, had disrupted the balance of power in a single night. Amara walked among them as if nothing had happened. But every smirk, every whispered insult, every glance of suspicion sharpened her resolve. For the first time, she wasn't merely invisible, she was a threat. And threats had consequences. Juneseo found her later, in the quiet of the supply room. His eyes, dark and calculating, didn't carry reproach, only acknowledgement. He handed her a file, thicker than any she had ever touched, and spoke in a tone she could not ignore. "This is bigger than any one of us, Amara. If this leaks, people will lose everything, and not everyone will survive the fallout." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight of the trust he placed in her. By day, she was still the invisible maid, overlooked and underestimated. By night, she was now his confidant, a participant in a dangerous dance she had never imagined. The contrast burned through her. Isolation and recognition, vulnerability and power, fear and exhilaration. Every instinct told her to retreat, but something deeper, something thrilling, urged her forward. As the afternoon sun faded, a soft chime echoed through the lobby, an anonymous delivery unmarked and precise. Inside the envelope lay a single photograph. Amara, framed by security cameras she hadn't noticed, captured in moments that could ruin her entirely, written in bold letters across the back. "Next time there will be consequences." Her fingers trembled as she studied the message, heart racing, not from fear, but from recognition. The stakes had escalated beyond the building, beyond Juneseo, beyond anyone who had underestimated her. Tonight, nothing would remain safe. And from the shadows of the office, Jaeho watched, smirk replaced by calculation. He had failed once, but now he knew her moves, her habits, her patterns. The silent war had only begun. Amara folded the photograph carefully, tucking it into her apron. The mop felt heavier in her hand, the hallways darker, the building itself suddenly alive with unseen eyes. Amara held the photograph against her chest, the edges creasing beneath her fingers. Each image was a silent accusation, moments of her routine captured with a precision that made her blood run cold. Every corridor she had walked, every quiet glance at Juneseo's office had been watched. Yet, paradoxically, the fear did not overwhelm her. It sharpened her senses, illuminated every detail she had previously overlooked. The mop in her hand felt less like a tool and more like a a symbol of a power no one dared recognize. By day, she remained invisible, cleaning floors and dodging whispers. By night, she was becoming a player in a dangerous game where one misstep could unravel everything. Across the city, the lights of Seoul shimmered, like eyes watching her fate unfold. She slid the photograph back into her apron, determined to move as if it held nothing, but she knew better. The stakes had shifted, and the invisible had become a target. Later, in the office near Juneseo's private wing, she overheard him speaking to a colleague. Words meant to remain confidential. Trust is fragile. Outsiders cannot be allowed near this information, he said sharply, his voice carrying across the hall. Amara's chest tightened. She misread the statement entirely, assuming he no longer trusted her, that the quiet bond they had formed was fragile at best. For the first time, she questioned her place beside him. Was she a valued confidant, or a liability he would discard if the tides turned? The contrast between what she had believed, his subtle recognition, the silent gestures, the shared understanding, and what she heard now ignited a storm of doubt. Her mind raced, weighing the consequences of staying silent versus revealing what she knew. The line between caution and fear blurred, every heartbeat a reminder of the precarious balance she walked. A single document lay on the desk, slightly askew, as if inviting scrutiny. It was the proof she had gathered, the key to exposing Jae-ho's schemes. Her hands hovered over it, trembling with anticipation and dread. One slip, one moment of visibility, could unleash chaos but also justice. As she considered her options, Jun Seo entered the room, the faint click of his polished shoes echoing like a warning. He paused at the doorway, gaze sharp yet unreadable, and for a second she thought he might see what she had discovered, confront her, or even punish her for her curiosity. Instead, he said nothing. He merely stood there, a shadowed sentinel. The almost reveal hung in the air, taut with tension. The secret on the desk, the photograph in her pocket, and the weight of his unspoken judgment. Amara's mind raced. Should she act now, risking exposure, or retreat into invisibility and wait for the right moment? Her instincts screamed to intervene, to place the pieces before Jun Seo, but doubt held her frozen. One glance, one move, and everything could spiral beyond control. From the corner of her eye, the office door cracked slightly, revealing a shadowed figure she did not recognize. Whoever it was moved deliberately, silently, aware of her, aware of the documents, aware of the threat she carried without realizing it. The room felt impossibly small, the walls closing in as the weight of anticipation pressed upon her. The almost reveal would either save everything or destroy it, and she could no longer tell which side of fate she would land on. Her heart leapt. She understood, with chilling clarity, that tonight she would be forced to choose. The figure in the doorway moved with deliberate precision, the faint click of shoes slicing through the silence of the office. Amara froze, every instinct honed over years of invisibility, screaming that this was no ordinary visitor. Her hands, still hovering over the incriminating documents, clenched the edge of the desk. It was Min Jae-ho, but not alone. Behind him, another shadow shifted, barely perceptible. Kong Min-soo, a board member known for charm and poise, but whose reputation for ruthlessness had always lingered in whispers. The room, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like a cage. Every breath Amara took seemed amplified, her heartbeat echoing through the polished floor as the duo's eyes locked onto her with recognition she had never wanted. For the first time, she realized the depth of the threat. The documents, the photograph, her silent observations, they had all been noticed, catalogued, and targeted. Jae-ho's smirk faltered, replaced by something darker. "You've been playing in a game far above your pay grade," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Did you really think no one would notice?" Amara's pulse quickened, but not with fear. She had prepared for confrontation, but the revelation cut deeper. Min-soo stepped forward, holding a folder identical to the ones Amara had nearly exposed, a mirror of the secrets she had uncovered. "You've been cleaning floors while we've been cleaning evidence," Min-soo continued, lips curling. "Every file you touched, every corridor you passed, it was all observed. You're clever, Maid, but clever isn't enough." The twist hit with a precision sharper than any threat. The corruption she had suspected wasn't merely a single executive. It was systemic, a network reaching into the very foundation of Daehan Group. The enemies weren't just opportunistic, they were orchestrators, waiting for her smallest mistake. Amara's mind raced. By day, she had been nothing, ignored, overlooked, assumed powerless. By night, she had become a player in a high-stakes game where misjudgment could mean ruin. The emotional contrast was unbearable, yet exhilarating. Powerless in appearance, yet armed with knowledge that could dismantle them. She assessed their movements, every subtle twitch, every glance exchanged between Jae-ho and Min-soo. Their coordination betrayed their strategy. They had underestimated her, yes, but only slightly. And that margin, that tiny miscalculation, could be her advantage. From the shadows, Juneo's office light remained on, a silent signal that he was still watching, still calculating, still ready. The foreshadowing was unmistakable. Tonight would not end quietly, and the consequences of her next move would echo far beyond the supply room. Jae-ho moved closer, reaching for the documents she had barely touched. "Step aside," he hissed. Min-soo's eyes glinted with the satisfaction of someone certain of victory. Amara hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. Had Jun Seo really trusted her, or was this just another test? The misunderstanding twisted the tension. Every instinct screamed to act, but fear of misjudgment threatened to paralyze her. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. One wrong move, and the years of calculated invisibility, the silent observations, and the subtle manipulations would collapse. One right move, and she could turn the tables, revealing the depth of the conspiracy in a single, decisive stroke. Amara's fingers brushed the papers, her mind calculating faster than the human eye could follow. Just as she decided to act, the office door swung open violently. Jun Seo stepped in, his presence sharp, commanding, and unmistakable. But he was not alone either. Behind him, a figure she had not expected, someone whose motives she could not yet read, emerged, eyes fixed on the documents on her and on the men who thought they had the advantage. The room froze. Power, secrecy, and danger hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Amara understood with chilling clarity that nothing would remain the same tonight, and that every choice from this moment forward would carry consequences far beyond her imagination. The office hummed with a tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls. Amara's pulse, steady but electrified, mirrored the building's own rhythm. Jae-ho and Min-soo stood rigid, their eyes fixed on the papers on her and on the unexpected figures that had entered moments ago. Jun Seo's presence filled the room like a blade slicing through fog. Sharp, unyielding, and undeniable, the silent sentinel became the pivot around which the entire confrontation would turn. Amara, still in her uniform, mop forgotten for the first time in years, understood that the balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The documents on the desk were no longer mere evidence. They were weapons, catalysts, and threats all at once. And for the first time, the woman no one noticed felt the weight of visibility in every fiber of her being. Jun Seo moved deliberately, placing himself between Amara and the conspirators. "This ends now," he said, voice low but echoing through the room like thunder. "No one undermines Daehan Group under my watch, and no one harms her without consequences." The statement was simple but devastating. Jae-ho faltered, realizing the shift. The maid they had dismissed as irrelevant was now protected by the most powerful man in the company. Social hierarchies crumbled in an instant. Executives whispered, security guards shifted uncomfortably, and the air seemed to pulse with disbelief. Amara, standing silently, felt a mixture of vindication and anxiety. She had been ignored, belittled, and overlooked for years. Now her presence alone could command protection and fear simultaneously. The invisible had become untouchable, at least temporarily, and the building itself seemed to tremble at the reversal. Despite the protective barrier, doubt gnawed at her. Was June Seo acting out of duty, strategy, or something more personal? Their eyes met briefly, his steady, unreadable, yet unmistakably attentive. A flicker of something unsaid passed between them. Acknowledgement, concern, and a dangerous tension neither could name. Yet the misunderstanding lingered. Amara could not tell if his protection was absolute, if he fully trusted her, or if this confrontation was a test she might fail. Every glance, every subtle movement in the room seemed layered with meaning, a silent code she had to decipher while keeping the conspirators at bay. The air was suddenly punctuated by the shrill ring of a phone. Jae-ho's assistant rushed in, handing over a call with shaking hands. The voice on the line was low, urgent, almost conspiratorial. They know everything. Amara's movements, the documents, even the meeting with June Seo, the voice warned. If action isn't taken, the fallout will reach beyond the company. Amara's stomach twisted. What had started as internal scheming had grown into something far larger, an external network, hidden eyes, unseen consequences. Every step she had taken, every corridor she had cleaned, every detail she had observed now had the potential to ignite disaster. The conspirators exchanged looks, realization dawning that the fight was no longer merely within office walls. June Seo's calm precision became a lifeline, but the threads of danger extended far beyond her comprehension. Amara's fingers hovered over the documents again, every instinct screaming to protect what she now understood could topple empires. Suddenly, the office lights flickered, and the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally. A soft knock echoed from the outer door. Slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The voice that followed was unmistakable, low and cold. "I've been waiting to meet the maid who thinks she can play with forces she doesn't understand." The room froze. Every eye turned to the door. Every heartbeat stretched. Every breath halted. Amara realized with chilling clarity that the war had only just begun, and that the next move would be far more dangerous than anything she had faced before. The door creaked open slowly, as if savoring the tension it had already created. Every eye in the room locked onto the figure stepping inside, a man whose presence carried the quiet authority of someone used to controlling outcomes long before others realized a game had begun. Director Han Sung-wook, a name rarely spoken but always respected in hushed tones, entered with measured confidence. His gaze swept across the room, dismissing Jae-ho and Min-soo almost instantly before settling on Amara. There was no confusion in his expression, no curiosity, only recognition. The air shifted. What had once been an internal power struggle now revealed itself as something far more calculated. The voice from the door had not come to observe. It had come to claim control. Han stepped closer, his presence suffocating in its calm certainty. "You've been impressive," he said, his tone almost conversational, yet laced with warning. "But you were never meant to reach this far." Amara's mind sharpened instantly. Every detail she had collected, every subtle inconsistency in the company's operations began to align. The conspiracy was not merely about financial manipulation. It was about restructuring power, quietly redirecting control of Daehan Group into unseen hands. And she had disrupted it. Jun Seo's voice cut through the tension, colder than before. "This ends here." But even he understood the shift. Han was not a man easily cornered. He was the architect behind the chaos, the unseen force orchestrating every move from the shadows. The emotional contrast deepened. Amara, once ignored and powerless, now stood face to face with the man who had shaped the entire conflict. Fear flickered at the edges of her awareness, but it was overshadowed by something stronger: clarity. Amara stepped forward, her voice steady for the first time in the open. "You underestimated the wrong person," she said, each word deliberate. The room stilled. For years, she had been silent, absorbing, observing, existing on the margins. Now, every suppressed thought, every overlooked insight, converged into a single moment of undeniable presence. Jun Seo watched her closely, something unguarded flickering in his eyes. Respect, trust, and something far deeper that neither of them had allowed themselves to confront. The misunderstanding that had lingered between them began to dissolve, replaced by a shared understanding forged in risk and resilience. They had both been protecting each other in silence. Now, silence was no longer an option. Han's composure faltered, just slightly. It was enough. Amara seized the moment, placing the documents firmly on the desk. "Every move you made left a trace," she said. "Every hidden file, every manipulated account, it's all here." Jae-ho shifted uneasily. Min-soo's confidence cracked. The illusion of control they had maintained began to crumble under the weight of evidence they had believed untouchable. Jun Seo stepped forward, aligning himself beside Amara, not in front of her, not shielding her, but standing with her. The shift was subtle but profound. This was no longer a story of protection. It was a partnership. The stakes had reached their peak. Exposure was inevitable, but so was retaliation. Han's expression hardened, the calm facade replaced by something colder, more dangerous. "You think this is over," he said quietly. "You've only exposed the surface." Before anyone could respond, the office lights flickered again, plunging the room into a brief darkness that felt far too intentional. When the lights returned, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Guards moving in the distance, alarms beginning to stir, the building itself reacting to an unseen command. Amara felt it instantly. The final move had been triggered. The war was no longer hidden. It had become public, irreversible, and dangerously close to its conclusion. And standing at the center of it all, she realized that the next step would determine not just her fate, but the future of everything Jun Seo had built. The alarm spread through the building like a pulse, sharp and relentless. What had once been silent corridors of power now echoed with urgency. Security teams mobilizing, executives rushing, voices overlapping in confusion and fear. Amara stood at the center of it all, the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. The hidden war had been dragged into the light. Every secret, every manipulation, every calculated betrayal was unraveling faster than anyone could contain. Across from her, Han Sung-wook's calm demeanor cracked, just enough to reveal the danger beneath. This was no longer a controlled operation. The system he had carefully manipulated was turning against him. And beside her, Jun Seo moved with absolute certainty. The final gamble had begun. Without hesitation, Jun Seo stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos as he addressed the gathering executives who had begun to flood the room. "This ends now," he said. "Every hidden transaction, every falsified record exposed." He paused, his gaze shifting to Amara, not as a subordinate, not as someone beneath him, but as an equal. "And she stands with me, not as a maid, not as an outsider, but as the woman I trust above all others, the woman I intend to marry." The room fell into stunned silence. The weight of his words shattered every expectation, every hierarchy, every prejudice that had defined the building. Amara felt the shift instantly. The whispers that once dismissed her now dissolved into something else. Shock, disbelief, and for the first time, undeniable respect. The evidence spoke louder than any declaration. Screens flickered to life across the building, documents and records flooding every department. The truth could no longer be hidden. Jae-ho's composure collapsed entirely, his carefully crafted image unraveling in front of everyone. Min-soo attempted to retreat, but security had already begun closing in. Their years of manipulation, their calculated exploitation of power, crumbled within minutes. Han stood still, his options narrowing, the inevitability of defeat settling into his expression. The empire he had sought to control slipped through his fingers, dismantled not by force, but by the one person he had deemed insignificant. Amara watched it unfold, the realization grounding her. This was not luck. This was the consequence of every moment she had been overlooked, every detail she had absorbed, every silent observation turned into action. The chaos began to settle, replaced by a fragile stillness. For the first time, the building felt different, not dominated by arrogance, but stripped bare of it. Junesio turned to Amara, his expression no longer guarded. There was no distance between them now, no misunderstanding, no silent barriers. She had stepped out of invisibility, not by force, but by truth. And he had chosen her, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. The emotional weight of everything they had endured lingered, heavy yet freeing. The war had been fought, the truth revealed, and the balance restored. As the authorities moved in, and the last fragments of the conspiracy were secured, Amara's gaze shifted toward the towering windows of the building. The city stretched endlessly beyond, lights shimmering like distant promises. For a moment it seemed over, but as she turned back, her eyes caught something subtle, a reflection in the glass, a figure moving where no one should be. Not part of the board, not part of the security team. Watching, waiting. The victory was real. The war within the building had ended. But beyond its walls, something else had already begun. The reflection in the glass lingered just long enough to leave an impression, and then it was gone. Amara stood still, her gaze steady, her instincts alert. The victory inside the building had been real, undeniable, and hard-earned. Yet the faint presence beyond the glass reminded her of something she had learned too well. Power never disappeared, it only shifted. But this time, she did not retreat into silence. She did not shrink into invisibility. Instead, she turned away from the window, away from the shadow, and walked forward into the light of a world that had finally begun to see her. Days passed, and the transformation of Daehan Group became impossible to ignore. The arrogance that once filled its halls had been replaced with caution, respect, and an unspoken acknowledgement of change. Amara no longer walked with a mop in her hand. The uniform that once marked her as invisible was gone, replaced by quiet elegance that reflected who she had always been beneath the surface. Yet her posture remained the same, grounded, observant, unshaken. The same executives who once dismissed her now lowered their gazes as she passed, not out of fear alone, but out of recognition. The hierarchy had not just shifted, it had been rewritten. Junesio stood beside her, not as a distant protector, but as a partner who had chosen to stand with her in every sense. His decision had cost him alliances, strained loyalties, and forced him to confront the very system he once controlled with precision. Yet there was no hesitation in him. In a quiet ceremony, far from the spectacle the world might have expected, he kept his word. No grand displays, no unnecessary extravagance, only a moment defined by clarity and truth. Amara walked forward, not as someone rescued, not as someone elevated by another's power, but as someone who had claimed her place through resilience and intelligence. And when their hands met, it was not a union of imbalance, but one of equals. The remnants of the conspiracy faded into consequence. Jae-ho and Min-soo faced the full weight of their actions, their influence dismantled piece by piece. Han Sung-wook, once untouchable, became a cautionary tale whispered in the same halls he had tried to control. Karma did not arrive with noise or spectacle. It settled quietly, inevitably, leaving no room for escape. Amara, once the silent observer, became part of the foundation that rebuilt what had been broken, not by erasing the past, but by ensuring it would never repeat itself. The building stood as it always had, tall, polished, unyielding. But within it, everything had changed. Amara paused briefly in the hallway where she had once been invisible, her reflection now clear and undeniable in the glass walls. The memory of who she had been did not fade, it strengthened her. She turned, walking forward without hesitation, her presence no longer questioned, no longer dismissed. And as the doors closed behind her, the truth remained undeniable. She had never been just the maid. They had simply failed to see her.